Hello and welcome to a special podcast episode here. My name is Siddhartha Vaidyanathan. I'm Sidvi on Twitter, and I usually host the 81 All Out Cricket podcast. Today we have sort of a mixed podcast, if you may call it. So way back in 2019, a group of us used to do podcasts about movies as well as occasionally about cricket. At some point, two podcasts. One became the 81 All Out podcast that Mahesh and I then went on to sort of co-host. And then the other became the Other Banana podcast, which is a film podcast where a few of the others host regular podcasts on movies, largely based on South Indian movies, but also other Indian movies. So, yeah, here I'm welcoming two people who appear on the Other Banana podcast. There's Aditya Srikrishna, a freelance film critic, writes for multiple outlets. Welcome, Adi.
Hi, Sid. Hi. Good to be here.
Yeah, good to be here. And we also have Ananta, a friend of both podcasts, and also a avid film buff and cricket buff. Hi, Ananta.
Hey, hi, Sid. Nice to be back on the 81 All Out podcast as well. It's been a couple of years.
Yes,
Thank you.
For sure. Yeah. So, the reason we're here today and the reason why we're doing this sort of a mix of podcasts is that we're going to talk about the film that came out 83. This is a Ranveer Singh starrer directed by Kabir Khan that came out last year in theaters in India, but has now been released on OTT platforms, and you can watch it on Netflix if you are interested. This is an interesting movie because it is based on India's 1983 World Cup win, which one could argue is one of the most miraculous victories in cricket. So, we are going to talk about the film. There will be, spoilers along the way. So in case you haven't watched it, and please, you can mute, you can pause it at this point of time, watch it and come back, because we are definitely going to be revealing a lot of things that you may or may not want revealed. I mean, I look at the 1983 World Cup, as a cricket fan, right? I look at it as a 6-part miracle, and, purely in the cricketing sense. And, it is not just the victory over Zimbabwe, which was a miracle, and not just the victory in the final, which was, of course, came out of the blue, but there were also so many other parts to it. There was this match that India won in West Indies a few months before the World Cup, in Berbice in Guyana, which was a bolt in the blue, because to go to the West Indies at that time and to win a game, even if it was a solitary one-day game, was a huge deal. And this film makes absolutely no mention of that as a sort of a prelude to that World Cup, which many of the players have said was, instrumental in giving them a bit of a belief to take on the West Indies. There's also, the victory over Australia after the Zimbabwe game, the match against Australia, which was a terrific win in itself, because India had got hammered by Australia earlier in the tournament. So to then win against Australia was like a huge deal. And of course, there was the semi-final win against England. Now, both these games, the Australia game is almost like largely ignored, the second Australia game. And the England game is mentioned, but the cricketing aspects of it and the reason for the cricketing miracle is not really brought out. So this film, I can understand in a sort of a 2.5-hour film, you can say that, you have to focus on certain things. But what I'm saying is, rather than get into all these external, oh wow moments, they could have focused on these 6 moments a bit more.
What I think this movie suffers from is a sense of occasion, right? I don't know whether they planned this release in such a way to coincide with something. I don't know if we had a big anniversary, a big moment in time where you could, look back and, reminisce about it. Maybe that's one place where this movie suffers from, because there's nothing special about this movie other than the fact that, yes, we won 1983 and a lot of people have not known about it. So why now? That why now question is not, it's not answered in this movie. And I think that this movie suffers because of that. The other thing is, like you said, right, Berbice is such a big thing for Indian cricket, not just because of what happened after that, but because it was I think the first ever win by India against a then test playing nation. Yeah, I might be wrong, but at least first win against the West Indies. It was the first ever win against the West Indies in a ODI, which was big.
I think away, you're right.
Away,
At home, I think they had beaten England and Sri Lanka and all that. Yeah.
So it was big, but I can see why mentioning Berbice would have been inconvenient, because if you look going into the movie, if you look at how the scenes or the screenplays and whatnot, you will see a lot of exposition about the West Indies team, how each player is actually described, and you see, I think it was Baluninder Singh Sandhu's character who's like standing behind net session and talking essentially to the audience, telling them about the West Indies attack. Now that scene would have been irrelevant if they had if they had to talk about Berbice up front, because it's pretty much the same team that played. And that, I think that match, Gavaskar went all out and hit them out of the park. I mean, much in a way that he did not even play in the 1983 World Cup. So I think leaving out Berbice was necessary to create that exposition moment.
Roger Berry explaining about each West Indies bowler, that I thought was really bad writing, bad filmmaking in a cricket movie. But going back to Berbice, I know you're saying that they ignored it because they wanted to have the build-up of how much of an underdog, or how much of even people in India had written them off and there was no hope. To say that this team is even the board doesn't care about this team, and this team doesn't. I mean, nobody even thinks of this team advancing or even winning a match, because their only win before this was in the World Cup was against East Africa. I think that came off disingenuous in some part. So that way, even Srikkanth asking Dujon that why are you standing so far back is kind of disingenuous, to say that Srikkanth doesn't know why he's standing so far back. That really was kind of funny to me.
Yeah, that is definitely a really poor moment there in the film, because a lot of the Indian players had just traveled to the West Indies a few months ago. So obviously they knew exactly why Dujon was standing far back.
And a great disservice to Amarnath, right? Like, he's through the entire movie, apart from what he does on the field, like which you already know about, off the field, his character is reduced to a dad-son conflict kind of thing. A son trying to meet his father's expectations. Lala Amarnath is painted as this, autocratic, which he was. All known accounts, he was like that towards his sons. But that's the only dimension that you see about Amarnath, which I think was a great disservice. And not mentioning Berbice probably aided that.
Mohinder Amarnath was an absolute hero of that World Cup. I mean, Kapil Dev, no doubt. But the whole reinvention of Mohinder Amarnath as a batsman through that season of 82-83 and going on to the 83 World Cup, I mean, is a remarkable sort of arc in itself. And they could have, instead of overdoing the Lala Amarnath bit, there was a great chance to actually bring this out. I mean, a lot of younger people who watch cricket these days may not understand what Mohinder Amarnath was to that generation, especially in 1983. Now, you speak to people in their 40s, they tell you that, Amarnath in 83 was the equivalent of, say, Sachin in 98 or Kohli in 2016. I mean, that is the kind of, impact, larger than life impact that he had on fans at the time. And they just completely missed it for this, like, overdoing this Lala Amarnath business. It's just disrespectful again.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
Which was the series? It was Pakistan and West Indies, right? The main series for Amarnath?
Yeah. I mean, that's when that's when he became the best batsman against fast bowling. Because before that, he had a lot of issues against fast bowling. But 83 was Mohinder Amarnath, full stop.
If there's one person who has some kind of, like, who gets some screen footage and to talk of is Srikkanth, right? A lot of what you see on screen, Srikkanth off the field, is what you've like heard about Srikkanth or have you seen about him post his retirement. I don't even know whether he was this kind of a person then. Like, by all accounts, he was quirky. We know how he got run out in his first ever test appearance or whatever, right? Walking. But I think those kind of things, I think they missed. And by making him talk that much, making him joke that much, I think they missed quite a few things about Srikkanth that could have come out. Again, I think that was again a disservice. But again, apart from Kapil Dev, I think Srikkanth is the one who gets a lot of screen time in this movie. And it's also because apart from Ranveer, Jiiva is probably the most accomplished actor. Like, Deepika is there. But apart from Ranveer, I think Jiiva happens to be one of the most accomplished actor there. So I think that's why he gets that much screen time. But again, one more person who's kind of let down in this movie is Srikkanth.
But I think Jiiva got the screen time because of this Srikkanth's honeymoon story that became famous, legendary after I think one of the felicitation events.
Yeah, the thing with Srikkanth is an important point is there's that scene where he makes that speech, right? Where they're all having drinks and he makes a speech and he toasts Kapil Dev and all that. Now that speech is basically a direct copy of a sort of a speech that Srikkanth gave that in that felicitation that Adi is talking about. So in that thing, which happened probably 10 years ago, talks about the World Cup. That's like the older Srikkanth, obviously, talks about the World Cup, looks back at it, and then everyone has a good laugh. Now, to assume that Srikkanth of 2008 was Srikkanth of 1983 is to then remove all curiosity from what the person might have been like back then. And the other thing that they really miss out, I mean, they do show that Srikkanth is a relative newbie to the team and that he was an aggressive batsman and, that was his natural game. That is fine. But what they don't really highlight is that for 1983, Srikkanth was a revolutionary batsman. Like his style. I mean, we all know about Jayasuriya in 1996, right? And there is this belief probably fairly held that, he revolutionized one-day batting. He did for the 90s. But Srikkanth in the 80s was pretty much trying to do what Jayasuriya did. He wasn't as successful, but to even attempt that was remarkable. Now, that has to be shown a little bit more with sort of cricketing nuance, and I don't think that really came through.
Like Kapil's 175 is almost like an outlier, or Vivrich is almost like an outlier. You have Yashpal Sharma scoring against West Indies. You have Srikkanth in the final having the highest score, but no one talks about that. You have Madan Lal. But when it comes to sports biopics or sports stories, you always have this individual styles or individual talents that you can focus on. For example, you have in the Dhoni biopic, you had the helicopter shot and how it was born and how it came about. And I remember there was this hockey player Sandeep Singh's biopic Surma, which focused on drag flick, which he was very good at and which he was best at. I think they had a problem of finding something like that in this team or in this era of cricket. And they just didn't do a good job of finding something like that in terms of the cricketing action itself.
Yeah, I mean, the point you make is perfect because one big problem I had with the film is that it does not approximate the rhythm of cricket in 1983, the rhythm of one-day cricket. Now, one-day cricket, as we know today, is just unrecognizable from what it was in 1983 because, first of all, they were playing 60-over games. Second of all, the par score was like vastly different. And, you need to show a certain sort of sedate rhythm for it to come out that people like Srikkanth and Kapil Dev and Viv Richards were exceptions. But in this case, you find out, by the end of it, you will be like, oh, okay, so everyone had a certain strike rate, and these guys were just like a little more than that. But that's not true at all. In fact, to get to be like 100 for 2 after 35 overs was not at all uncommon back at that time.
When it comes to this film, I can't help but wonder that how much of an aura does 1983 have for today's cricket fans? I'm talking about this not in terms of film's quality, but there was a lot of talk about the trade of how, despite the biggest opening since the pandemic for a film in the theaters, this film kind of flopped, which is really surprising, not because of the quality of the film, but because of the subject of the film. I thought everyone expected this film to do so well, but it got almost steamrolled by Spider-Man and Pushpa, and it made me wonder that if this film, not this film, the idea of the 1983 Cricket World Cup, did they overestimate its appeal to today's cricket fans? Is there anything to that theory?
So, Adi, that's what I was saying, that the timing, I don't know whether it was a hit or a miss. I'm saying there was no sense of occasion, right? I think this, as you say, right, this would have been if it focused to the kind of people that are, slightly older than me, who have memories of watching the World Cup at that point of time. If the movie was targeted at them, there's nothing new in the movie, right? If it is targeted against the younger audience that you know of, again, as you say, as Sidvi said, there's no context, right? There's no context. The pace does not match, things like that. So I think it missed something there. It was neither here nor there. I think that's what there. But again, to be honest, it is still a good time pass watch, if you ask me, because like I watched it with my wife and she doesn't follow cricket as much as I do. She enjoyed the movie, right? For a casual watcher, they would still come and watch, but you know how movies these days work, right? You need a huge opening and you need repeat audiences. And I don't think this movie had enough in there to get that kind of a reaction.
I mean, let's, also not end up being grouchy old men, just, slamming the movie. One of the things that the movie does extremely well is that it shows the Kapil Dev, the one part of the Kapil Dev character that it shows is very well done. Where Ranveer, tells you that you can struggle in talking English and still be, and struggle to be like a public speaker and still be internally extremely confident and extremely strong. So that aspect of it, he does very well. The Kapil Dev accent, he sort of pretty much nails down the Kapil Dev English accent. I loved how he has gone about it, not in a sort of a mocking way, but in a genuine way. He has genuinely spoken like Kapil Dev, and also the whole aspect of his own struggle with trying to be this leader, because at that time it was Gavaskar he had replaced Gavaskar not too long ago. I mean, before the West Indies series, and then he was also learning on the job, and for him to then portray the fact that he's not too comfortable like being this statesman-like figure for the team, but at the same time he's extraordinarily confident in his own abilities. I think that comes out very well, and hats off to Ranveer for portraying that. Of course, Ranveer also tries his best to try and portray Kapil Dev on the field. He does his bit. No one can fault him for his attempts. But the real Kapil Dev and his fluidity on the field and that absolutely natural ability is something that nobody, not even the greatest actors, can come close to, simply because, that is Kapil Dev.
In general, even the cricketing action is actually shown very nicely. Like the use of the replays, the use of cuts to still pictures from that era. Those are all they've done quite a good job there. So I think that those are the things that would endear the movie to people that don't know anything about it in 1983. I think cricket is a difficult sport to show on screen, and they've done a very good job there.
I agree with you when you said about the bowling action that you can only create. I mean, you can imitate it to an extent, but the exact flow and the style is not going to not really going to be completely recreated. And I think that's the reason they go for this cut where you don't see the full run up of anyone and the ball reaching the bat. There's always a cut, and then there is the shot being played, and then you see where the ball is going. I think I think that's a compromise that any film has to make when it comes to showing cricket as a whole, like from the hands of the bowler to hitting a boundary or even taking a wicket. I think I mean filming a catch, a difficult catch, is more dramatic and than on film. I mean, than just showing a bowling run up. Like we get excited seeing a bowler bowling a ball and setting up a batsman, but you can't really recreate that on film.
One of the things that this film could have done better is when it lingers on these particular, wickets or shots or catches or something, like the Kirti Azad ball to Ian Botham, which has gained legendary status after that. It could have, done a slightly more subtle job of explaining the cricketing aspect as well. I mean, it turns out into a bit of a parody, right, at the end of it, where people are asking Kirti how he bowled that ball, and then he is sort of acts as if he can't explain, and then he also genuinely doesn't know. Now, there are ways in which you can do that without making it seem like parody. But and the other thing is that Balwinder Singh Sandhu ball to Gordon Greenidge in the final, I mean, which has, of course, now, everyone knows exactly where they were when that ball was bowled, or so at least in their imagination. But I felt that, again, there could have been a bit more lingering in that ball rather than Gavaskar just saying, hide it and don't show it. That's one aspect of it. But I just feel like the sheer visual miracle of that ball needed a slightly bit more lingering and cricketing explanation. Or not just explanation, just like moment of pause.
So, but about the dynamics of the players themselves, right? So, I don't know if the Gavaskar Kapil Dev dynamic was explored as much as I thought it should have. There's one scene where Man Singh comes and talks to Gavaskar, and again, that scene there where he says, I'm injured and I cannot play, there's so much seriousness there. It seems slightly out of place in the movie itself because otherwise there's not a lot of interaction between Gavaskar and Kapil Dev at that point. Maybe it was not needed for this movie, but again, there's context there, right? There's the relationship.
You have to remember that the players were also quite closely involved with this film. So if to bring out that aspect would have needed like the okaying of the players, which obviously neither Gavaskar nor Kapil Dev would have wanted to bring out the friction that existed between them at that time. So I think that is again a good thing for the movie as well as a bad thing. Good thing because the players have obviously, revealed a lot of their stories to the director, and, they have brought in a lot of input. But you can't really bring out these aspects when you have Kapil Dev and Gavaskar so closely associated with your film.
Yeah, but also moving on, Sylvie, I wanted to ask you about the main inaccuracies and the mongoose bat, which was slightly cringe. To bring mongoose bat in 1983.
So yes, that. I mean, I understand that a movie will take its creative liberties and there will be like artistic license. All that I completely understand. But a movie like this is also a historical document, right? So you have to try and at least get like some of the basics right, so that people who are new to cricket or people who are new to 1980, that era of cricket, will sort of begin to appreciate this a bit more. Like, for instance, why say mongoose bat when that bat has a name. It's called the WG Excalibur. Okay, you don't have to say WG. You can just say Excalibur, which is pretty much what is like a talwar, right? I mean, which is what Kapil Dev says in Hindi. He says, get me the talwar. But why not say Excalibur? Why say mongoose? Because, I mean, it's not like the young fan is going to, feel totally alienated from the film if the bat has a different name. It just will, in fact, he will appreciate that, even back then, there were bats that came in various sort of sizes, and even there were funky bats present even then. And this particular bat, I mean, I'm not expecting this film to go so detailed into it, but this particular bat was, like there was a nice in-story about this bat too, on how, players like Lance Cairns and Kapil and like the big hitters of that time were using this bat. So that is one thing. The second thing is like, basic stuff like Kapil Dev is talking about, Ranveer Singh is talking about the famous Grovel statement, right? That Tony Greig made against West Indies in 1976. And he says, when he made that statement, the West Indies just kept quiet. They didn't say anything. But what did they do? They went on to win 2 World Cups. But they had already won a World Cup before that. They had already won the 1975 World Cup before Tony Greig made that statement. So, I mean, if you want to talk about the glory of that West Indies team, you could have simply brought up the tour to Australia in 74, 75, or was it 75, 76? Basically the tour to Australia, where they got hammered. The Greg Chappell-led Australian team basically hammered the West Indies to an extent that Vivian Richards' confidence was completely shot. Dennis Lillee and Jeff Thompson basically just sort of brutalized, the batting order. And that is when Clive Lloyd basically said, I need pace bowlers. Pace is the way to go. Vivian Richards went to the famous psychologist, Rudy Webster. He sort of reinvented his game and they came up. Now, that is a classic way to show, there's an example right there. Why are you bringing up a factual inaccuracy of this grovel about this World Cup win? Okay, so these are things that could have easily been shifted around to simply educate the audience a little better. But instead, you've gone and made these gross inaccuracies. I mean, and also that Zimbabwe game, it was not technically do or die. I mean, even if India had lost to Zimbabwe, they could have beaten Australia in the next game and gone through to the semi-finals. Now, a film, I can understand, wants to dramatize things.
Yeah, plus the 175, they couldn't let go of that, right? Yeah.
Yeah, they could. I understand it. But even then, I mean, would it have hurt so much to say that, if we lose this match, it becomes extremely important to go to the thing. But no, you have to make it like lose and you're out, right? When it wasn't the case. So I'm just saying that somebody who had no idea of 1983 comes and watches this film, they get a different perspective of that tournament itself. And whether a director should be okay taking such an artistic liberty, I don't know. I'm not too sure about that. Right in the last scene, if you remember, the manager T.R. Man Singh, he says that he went to his room after that and he wrote a letter to David Frith. And he said that, you wrote India off and you this thing. But the fact is, the person who wrote the letter was a Panwar Man Singh from New Jersey. And this has been an issue that has been simmering for a while in cricket, the dark cricket space, if you may call it that, like Reddit and those kind of cricket spaces, where it has been proven that the person who wrote the letter was a long-time resident of the US in New Jersey. He came from a cricketing family. He migrated to the US, much earlier, and he wrote this letter. And in fact, if you read the Wisden Cricket Monthly letter, it clearly says Man Singh, New Jersey. So for this manager Man Singh to claim that he wrote the letter, well, he might have, but the fact is that letter wasn't published. The letter that was published was by the person who wrote it from the US. So that is, of course, that is quite jarring, and most people will not know that, but they should. They should understand that, it wasn't this Man Singh, but another Man Singh.
Yeah.
Let's also talk a bit about the nationalistic aspect of it. I mean, clearly this is a movie made for the modern Indian audience, the modern Indian sensibility, where everything has to be related to nation and nationhood and patriotism. And that scene where the manager is standing on the roof of Tunbridge Wells and saluting. I mean, I just felt, come on, man. I mean, there's a limit to this.
Sign of the times, right?
Yeah, and the whole border fracas of cutting to that before during a match, and the bombings, and then there's one particular moment that I don't like where you have this very typical Hindi commentary, right? There's a boundary and you say Seema Rekha ke par, and then immediately it cuts away from the border. I'm like, what the hell? Why do you have to do
No,
that?
Adi, I can at least see in a movie like this, I can at least take that, because they can claim that wars have been stopped for World Cup games. I mean, quite another matter. It's a football match. I believe still is like two African countries in the middle of a war with each other. I think they stopped the game because their countries were playing football in the World Cup. So that creative license I can understand, but yeah, it just got a little too jingoistic. I would have preferred it stay within the team, but again, that's a sign of the times.
Of course, the World Cup made a huge difference in sort of making the sport far more, popular. I mean, what was a big city sport ended up, becoming a sport for the masses over the period of the next several years. I mean, we shouldn't forget the 1985 World WSC victory, and then there were several other reasons why cricket became popular. But the 83 can be seen as the logical starting point of that cricket becoming a mass sport. So I'm okay giving them the license to go all jingoistic, at the end of that thing. But to do so right at the beginning, to bring in the Indian Army and scenes from that, like before the first game, and then to look at this manager standing on the roof after Tunbridge Wells, I don't know. I mean, and I call it the punchline-itis, right? Basically, I mean, this whole reason to make every scene into oh wow sort of moment. I mean, that's just bad storytelling. That's just bad movie making. You have to be able to balance the low and the high, and the surprise comes because you have had like a few minutes of lull, and then you're like, oh, okay, this happened, and that is sort of the way to tell the story. I mean, in this, it's like every line is like, okay, we have to make it like the most shocking. I mean, not shocking, like the most impressive line ever, kind of thing, and that's just bad writing.
Yeah, and most of the myth building that this movie does is made up of stuff that everybody came to know in the last 5 years, right? Everything that like happens out, like you talked about that speech from Srikkanth, right? And a lot of there's even that famous Srikkanth thing where he says Patta Bhagyam Padati Legyam. That's one single Tamil line, right? He's repeated this a lot. And like during the match, when someone comes in, I think it was Mohinder Amarnath on the other end who comes and says, why are you speaking like this? He says, that's the only way I know how to play Patta Bhagyam Padati Legyam, and he walks back to his crease. A lot of that kind of myth building that has happened post facto, it's just exploited throughout in this movie. And it's
no, but that is still okay. I think that is fine, because invariably it will happen in historical, these sort of movies where, the post facto will come in. But, honestly, as 3 Tamil speakers on this pod, let us get this clear. The subtitle, when that Patta Bhagyam Padata Legyam comes, the English subtitle says, damn if you do, damn if you don't. Let's please tell our audiences that is not what it is. Please don't. That is a very wrong translation. And Ananta, please explain what exactly it means.
Bhagyam is what? Bhagyam is gift, or Legyam is fortune. Yes. Yeah. Bhagyam is fortune. Legyam is something that you eat to aid your digestion.
Yeah. So medicine. Yeah.
Medicine. Yes. No, but the thing is, the other thing for that is typically anything that Srikkanth utters on anywhere he talks, right? It's not translatable properly, man. You can't translate it. It's like that. Srikkanth is something else, right? To even attempt to translate some of what he says, I think they could have just left it without that subtitle.
I'm sure there is like a thing they could have done, but yeah, I mean, to reduce it to damn if you do and damn if you don't is quite odd. But you're right. Srikkanth is untranslatable in most senses, and Srikkanth is also like an emotion, right? Like you need to be in that state of mind to understand Srikkanth. And this movie tries. I mean, let me give credit to these people and to Jiiva specifically that he has tried his best to bring out the current Srikkanth, who is often a parody. But I just wish that there was a bit more curiosity about the younger Srikkanth and how he might have been back in '83 as a relatively young member of the team who was also trying to be this swashbuckling player whose natural style was this. I think that would have added a bit more heft to the movie itself.
Yeah. And that scene where they go eat dosa was funny, I should admit. I don't know whether it really happened, but it was.
That's okay.
It was
I'm willing to take that because it brings out the fact that back then Indian teams struggled to get food. Like vegetarians in the team struggled to get good vegetarian food, and so he found this family. He goes and eats dosa over there, and of course that family as a young girl who they want to marry off to Srikkanth. All that is the additional masala, which may or may not have happened. But I think it's a good angle to bring out that it was very hard for earlier teams to get good food if they were vegetarian.
Yeah, so that's one of the few things they showed, right? As opposed to talking about it.
Yeah,
they
exactly.
actually showed.
Yeah.
Those are the good parts.
Exactly. That definitely.
Yeah.
And also, Adi, you can go, but I think we should also delve a bit on Pankaj Tripathi, who carries the film for a long time. Yeah.
Yeah, I did think that Pankaj Tripathi, Ranveer Singh, and Jiiva were the ones who were really trying something of a performance. To at least, if not perfectly recreate, but at least have a performance that actually impacts the film, and they were not like as caricatures of real life figures. And definitely the three performances that stand out. And Deepika is really more of a. I think it's the casting itself is. It's just for the because of Ranveer and Deepika. I don't the other cringe scene was really Deepika going out of the stadium and then trying to get back in. That drama did not work for me at all, and that's another cringe that I thought could have been avoided.
Yeah, see, I think the fact is that in real life, I think what happened is Romi Dev, if I'm not mistaken, and this is the story that Kapil has said, is that I think halfway through the game, she and a couple of others decided to go shopping because they basically wrote India off. And, Romi Dev was not like as big a cricket fan as Deepika's portrayed, at least as far as I've read. So I think they've taken off on that and then said that, okay, she left because India were losing and then watched it. Obviously, they couldn't show Deepika just going and shopping and not caring about what happened. So I think that is one thing that has happened. But anyway,
shall I go where maybe you don't want to go? What do you think of casting Neena Gupta as Kapil's mom?
Yeah, that was a meta level thing, especially when there's this particular. Actually, there is even a scene where they immediately cut to Viv Richards after showing Neena Gupta. So it's like, oh, okay, this is the new level of meta that is coming in. No, but Pankaj Tripathi is a good casting. I can't think of anyone else who could have done this role well. I mean, I also like the fact that a cricket manager is playing such a central role in the movie, right? I mean, that is not something you would expect from cricket back in the day. Like, for instance, if I were to tell the story of 1983 World Cup, the PR Man Singh character would not be a central figure. He would definitely be there. But this movie has done a good job of bringing that manager to the fold. He's also a good sort of device to use in the storytelling way to sort of tell you that there are these characters around cricket teams who tend to have more belief than the players themselves.
Yeah.
And they are important characters in teams because they feel that, this team is actually better than what they think they are. So I think it does a good job. I like the fact that, that scene where Man Singh is trying to goad Kapil Dev to give the speech. I like that fact because it brings out a good dynamic between the two. I also like how he's constantly trying to fight for Indian pride, with whether it's like he doesn't get a pass to Lords, or whether everything else that happens. And then there is in fact even a scene where he comes, and maybe it's in the poster as well, where it says dogs not allowed in this part, right? So, and he's standing there. So this whole colonial aspect of it, he's a great device to bring out. Whether they had to go the whole hog and make him stand on the roof of Tunbridge Wells, I don't know. But that it is true that Srikkanth was not allowed to go to the bathroom when Kapil Dev was making his 175. So that is a true thing which they have brought out well. They have said, Man Singh told the players to not move from their spots, and Srikkanth eventually had to wait for a long time before he went. All that is brought out well. And I feel the Man Singh character is a great addition to the team. Of course, Pankaj Tripathi is a phenomenal actor.
I think the way Man Singh was portrayed, I don't know about the real Man Singh, whether he is exactly, he had the belief that Pankaj Tripathi's character had, but I like how they, like you said, the way he's written as a real life manager anywhere, right? Where he has the back of his players, of his people. He never gives up on them, even though the rest of the country has. I think that's a character that was really needed here. Like apart from Kapil Dev, who even Kapil had to be goaded into backing the team in a way, and I think that's why that character works. And of course, Pankaj Tripathi is a huge part of it.
Yeah, no, I think even the real life Man Singh, he did have the belief, because people have said that only two people genuinely believed India will win the World Cup right from the beginning. Win means what? Had a chance to win the World Cup, that is Man Singh and Kapil. And people have mentioned this. And Man Singh has apparently, he also used to go to many of the players, and he used to say that, you are actually not as bad as you think you are. So, you should think. So all that is true, a part of the character. The other thing is, the Man Singh character also brings out the financial situation of the Indian board at that time, right? I mean, India today, the BCCI today is a far different beast than what the Indian Cricket Board was at that time, with financial difficulties. And, this was well before, even the per diem that players used to get used to be a pittance. And that comes out. Through the movie, you can see how Man Singh's, his tension over finances is overriding so many things, and even small things like the customs, getting the pickles through the customs, or those things.
And the nice flight cancellations,
flight cancellations, very nice touches to the whole thing. And Pankaj Tripathi does a great job of bringing that out.
There's one last thing that I wanted to ask you, Sidvi, about now that the BCCI is like, I don't know, it's cash rich seems like too small a phrase, but like we talked about documentaries bringing the real story and making these things better, right? So in terms of footages and in terms of working, like using these footages, is BCCI really doing a great job? Like, do we have great stuff on the series, on all the series that India has won or India has performed well, or even the individual stories? Like I know Cricket Australia is doing a lot in the last 5-6 years, but are we doing enough? Because we're generally not good with archiving at all. Like I know in the cinema world, it's really bad.
It's terrible. I mean, I think the BCCI can do so much more. Forget documentaries and things. I mean, that is almost the final step in this process. So I think what the BCCI is not doing at all is to celebrate their own team that is doing so well. There is like hundreds of documentaries that can be made. There is a lot of cultural value that we are missing out on. And, the IPL is its own, sort of thread in its own thing. You can make multiple movies and documentaries about the IPL or about India's test. I mean, even like the Indian tour to Australia in like 2020-21, right? Which resulted in this, like out of the blue victory at the Gabba. I mean,
Yeah.
there was like Sony did make something, but whether it was fitting and whether it matched what happened on the field, I don't think so. And anyway, I mean, let's not worry about that one single thing that happened, but there needs to be a lot of other things that needs to happen. As you know, there could be like multiple documentaries made on that. There could be. I think the biggest problem is the footage right now. BCCI wants to guard its footage really close for whatever reason. It's unwilling to even put it on YouTube or put it on any other thing, and so it becomes really hard. Then it's up to them to really make full use of it, which they are not doing.
I think time is ripe for something like this to be filmed on the 85 World Series Cup victory, which I think was a far bigger win, if you ask me.
I mean, it was not as miraculous, but it was a far bigger cricketing achievement.
Correct. That's what I meant. It's a far bigger cricketing achievement. Because, again, the 83 win was a lot of highs and lows. But if you ask me, 85 was, like, I think we may have even gone there as one of the favorites. And we
by
managed
85,
to reaffirm
India was a good 180. Yeah.
So, and they were consistently good performances that people have to see. And not many people have seen that. There's been a lot of focus on 83, but not that much on 85. And pretty much anything that has happened since then until
2001,
the IPL began.
right? 2001. What a great chance in 2021. What a great chance it would have been, like after 20 years of that famous series where Harbhajan, Lakshman and everyone else won that series. What a great chance to make a documentary on that series. And to celebrate what was a phenomenal moment in Indian cricket and world cricket. And it was probably the best series ever played across 3 tests. So
Agreed.
Nobody has done anything on that. Can you believe there's not been a single good documentary / film / anything, even a book? I don't think there's even been a book about that series, which is like, which would have never happened had that series been between Australia and any other team or England and any other team. There would have been multiple resources already from that. I mean, take the 2005 Ashes, right? I mean, there have been like minimum 300 books and like so many documentaries and so much. I mean, they give you the cultural context of that series, and we have nothing like that for 2001.
So I think what is a problem right now is the folks that are running cricket, or the folks that have been running cricket, have tended to use the present to build a myth about the present. Like everything that they used to hype up cricket in India is things that happened a few months earlier, or the current players themselves. But no, we didn't get here because of what happened last month. We got here because of what happened in 83, 85, 87,
71,
92, 71. Yeah, even further, right? But again, ironically, we are talking about, I'm making the statement on a podcast that talks about a movie that was made about 1983. But that's far, that's still way too far. I mean, it's far and few. We need more like this. And if you have more such movies, right, I think we would appreciate stuff like this a little bit more. And I think that's what it is. We are still waiting for
a great documentary on 93. I mean, after all these years.
There's no documentary.
Yeah. So now that we're talking about other movies and other sort of works of art, let me bring in this Malayalam movie that was created in that came out a few years ago. This is a Nivin Pauly starrer 1983 that takes a completely different approach. It's not talking about this World Cup like head on, and it's definitely not getting too deep into the details of it, but it is talking about the cultural landscape of Indian cricket and the Indian cricket fan and the mindset of the cricket fan post, in the 80s and 90s, and talking about how, the lives became far more intertwined with cricket than it probably was earlier. I mean, it might have been earlier for city-based people, those who are living in the metros, but post, this thing, cricket became so much more a mass sport. And this film, 1983, brings that out well, where this character, Rameshan's life is so intertwined in cricket. Yeah, what did you guys make of it?
I love that movie because one, I looking at this movie 83 and 1983, right? So 1983, the new movie, is actually a perfect sort of a prequel to 1983 in the sense that the Nivin Pauly movie explains the context of why this new movie is important, right? How the win in 83 set a lot of people on their cricketing journey, right? Even like in the Nivin Pauly movie, you see cricket coaches talked about how their lives changed. That is what to me is missing from this new movie. You don't see what happened afterward, and that would have been a good thing to see. But also this it is a movie made from a fan's perspective, right? It shows what happens in a fan's life. In that sense, the Nivin Pauly movie actually shows you everything that happened in India from 1983 onward, all the way up to 2011. The 20 odd years of Indian cricket bookmarked by those 2 World Cup wins. It shows what happened in India. And I think it does it very well, very accurately. And a lot of us would put ourselves in Rameshan's character, right? Where the only thing that you want to do on a daily basis to play cricket.
I mean, we use the word miraculous to describe the 1983 win. And I think that is the main essence and impact of that World Cup, which the Nivin Pauly film captures, right?
Yeah, and the other thing that the Malayalam film does well is that, one of the typical sort of experiences of being a sports fan or being a cricket fan is that a lot of your life is signposted by cricketing events or sporting events. Like, for instance, if somebody was to ask me, something about 1994 or 1995, I would automatically, my mind would go back to what India were playing at that time, like the series India were playing. And then I would be immediately able to tell you where I was, what I was doing. So there is a deep-rooted connection between life and sport, and how you sort of your history of your life is told largely as the history of the sport that you follow, right? And that movie does a very good job of doing it in a subtle way. I mean, it doesn't need to really have this exposition method of bringing that out, but it is beautiful the way that Rameshan character moves on in life and how cricket is sort of weaved into many of his experiences.
No, the timeline essentially, right? The timeline of Rameshan's life, the only indicators are him watching cricket. What you see, like you see him get older, like the physical change is shown, but the passage of time is shown through the cricket that he sees on screen. And that's a very good way to, show things.
That is the essence of fandom. I mean, sport is so intricate to your life that, you begin to see it as part of your life history. Like, would you say that, 1998, can you look back on your life in 1998 without thinking of what Sachin was doing at that time? It's impossible for me. So I think that aspect needs to come out. Of course, this Ranveer Singh 83, there's no way for it to bring that out because the way in which it's telling the story is totally different. But there are elements which it could have done, because, it does show like a lady getting pregnant, and why this pregnancy has to become like come in the climax of so many of these movies. I don't understand why does a baby need to be delivered at the end of every movie, man. I mean, that cannot become that has become such a cliche. I mean, of course, there are movies where even babies have been delivered through vacuum cleaners and all at the end of the movie. I mean, let's not even go into that zone. But yeah, I found that a totally needless addition. And of course, needless to say that baby is named Kapil, and I mean, I'm like, okay, obviously we saw this coming.
But you know what? People should watch both movies. People should really watch both movies. People who don't know about what happened in 1983 should watch both, because both these movies are good companions, if you ask me. They're good
Definitely.
companions.
And I think there is another movie waiting to be made. I mean, multiple movies waiting to be made, but another movie waiting to be made as a precursor to 1983. Which brings in Indian cricket in the 70s, their attitude to one-day cricket. Hopefully bringing in the tour to West Indies, Berbice, and everything, and that leading into this World Cup. That is another story that needs to come in as well. So yeah, it needs to be like a three-parter.
And the good part is, it need not be 100% accurate. I mean, what I'm saying is, it could still be a fictional take. Like, have a lot of the main players, when I'm using players in a very loose way, right? Have a lot of the real characters, in the story arc, but it can be a completely fictional take. The background can be cricket, and I'm sure it is possible.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, in fact, we need more of that. I feel that, the cricket as a background score doesn't exist in many movies at all, though it should. And especially now, because cricket has become such a integral part of so much of life in India. All right. So I think we've covered some good ground here. We've spoken about the movie in detail. We've spoken about aspects of cricket, things that could have been better, things that were good, things we did enjoy. So yes, please watch the Kabir Khan movie 83. Please watch all the other movies that we've mentioned. Hopefully you have a good time. And if you don't, well, maybe your experience is similar to us. Please leave your comments. We have 81allout.com, which is the cricketing portion of our website. We are on Twitter at 81allout. In terms of the other podcast, The Other Banana, you have, The Other Banana is their Twitter handle. And you can go to their website, tobpod.com, and you will see all their previous podcasts and their discussions on several other movies. Anyway, so that brings us to the end of the podcast. Rate, review both the podcasts now that you've introduced to both. And thanks a lot, Ananta and Adi. It was good chatting.
Thank you.
Back for the second. India have won the test match. India have won the series. They're going to get back for two. India